Hello, this is MichaelFeeley, and welcome once again to my podcast, The Secrets of Da Vinci. So what do I have in store for you today? Well, again, I have lots of different things, seemingly different things. But as I always say, I'm just leading you to one place, and that is your own inner illumination. But before I start, I was made aware this week of a headline in a mainstream press, the Daily Mail, that stated that scientists have found electromagnetic energy inside the Great Pyramid. And now it seems to be some kind of electrical storage system, some kind of power plant. They also stated that they found modern day radio waves. Well, science is beginning to catch up. Leonardo da Vinci told me over 12 months ago that the Great Pyramid is in fact an antenna, amongst other things. And the battery for that antenna is the crystalline stones in the base of the Great Pyramid. Now, I found out that this antenna uses corrected true pi through mathematical phi, and also the mathematics of the base of the Great Pyramid, which I covered in previous episodes. So the Great Pyramid then represents the womb, which itself is an antenna attuned to the cosmic waves. So science is beginning to catch up. So now I'm going to move on to the fourth dimension. A little while ago, I had an out-of-world vision. And the out-of-world vision was of a cube surrounding the Earth. And this is similar to what I, in fact, saw. Now, when I saw it, what came to mind is the biblical writers, the mystics, who also have out-of-world visions. And it looked exactly how they described the New Jerusalem, the cube in the sky, the cubic city that came from the heavens. And it posed the question, did they see what I had seen? Did they have the same vision out of world? So I'll now go into a little bit more of this vision. So when you look at the German astrologer Kepler, he called the sphere in a square the inscribed sphere. And he claimed that this is the modeling of the whole solar system. So the whole solar system is modeled upon this and the vision that I had. Now, when you look at the likes of a square, it has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. If you add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, it gives you 10. This is the 10 special dimensions that science talks about. In my view, it is contained within 4 dimensions. So when you have a cube, you have 6 directions of coordinates of space. But not only do you have 6 directions, you also have 6 possible pairings of coordinates, which is XY, XZ, XW, YZ, YW, and ZW. So 6 directions and 6 potential pairings. When, however, you add the right angles, you get the W axis, which is the 4th dimension. And when you get to any 90-degree angle, any right angle on this cube, it gives you the W axis, which is at the 4th dimension. And the W is angular momentum. So the speed in which you take those corners is what Einstein is describing as time. 4th dimension as a time. This is also why we see the likes of UFOs zipping through the sky at 90-degree angles. It's because they are jumping between the 3rd and the 4th dimension. So 90-degree angles, the right angle, is the fourth dimension, the W axis, which is contained within 4 dimensions. Also, a while ago, I received some symbols in my head, which I wrote down. And this is what I saw, and this is what I wrote from that mental image. Now, I have shown this, or it has been shown, to a military scientist. And that military scientist has said that this is some kind of manifestation from 0 point. Ironically, where you get the Z, it is 0 point. There's many symbols that I can speak about from this board, but today I'm just going to speak about a couple of them that came to mind. So the ones that I will share today, because it's a continuous of the theme, are these 3 and these 2. So there are 5 symbols that I'm going to share with you. So in relation to these 3 symbols, a triangle is 3, the circle is 1, and the square is 4. So 3.14 gives us pi. So that is pi. Now, when we look at 4th dimensional pi, we get pi greater than 2. Now, when we do this in angle in radians, it gives us 90 degrees. 90 degrees, as I said, is W axis, which is the 4th dimension. And those 2 symbols are the W axis. They are the 4th dimension, and they turn at 90 degrees. So just those 5 symbols relate to 4th dimensional pi, mathematical pi. Now also, when we divide pi, so we get half pi, it's 180 over 2, which gives us 90 degrees. Again, the right angle, the W axis. Now the W, as I said, stands for angular momentum, the speed around angles, and that is your 4th dimensional time. Again, this is why UFOs are turning at 90 degrees. So these images then relate to UFOs in their flight. It relates to time. It relates to the New Jerusalem in the sky, the cube that surrounds Earth. It relates to mathematical coordinates, and it relates to the 90-degree angles in which we go from the 3rd to the 4th dimension. Now I'm going to move on to crop circles. Many years ago on social media, I saw a post where someone was claiming to have created a newly formed crop circle. And I posed a question. And that question was a simple one. Tell me how you encrypted the diatonic ratios. And the person making the claim on social media not only couldn't answer that question, but didn't even understand the question itself. If they could not understand the question and could not answer it, then they did not form the crop circle. So what are diatonic ratios? It is really a sound. They are notes. They are keys. Now, before I talk more about crop circles, again, I will refer to Leonardo's foreword in my book, The Movement, the Illumination of the World. The foreword is several pages long, but I'm just going to read literally the last paragraph, which is relevant to today. So Leonardo says, in 2012, we created a higher human consciousness for mankind. As you reach to embrace it, realization comes, and you will reach for freedom from bondage you have allowed yourself to embrace. A better world awaits. You're moving away from slavery. Now here comes the relevance. All I speak of is there for you to see, in ancient monuments, in the messages we send for you even now, in your fields of hay, crop circles, which the people able to think will learn how to read. Leonardo then also goes on about the Nazca lines, which those who can read will learn how to read them. But I will come on to the Nazca lines as my next subject. So what Leonardo is saying is that there is an advanced intelligence sending messages in crop circles. The shape themselves are created by atmospheric sound, the same as the beautiful geometry of a snowflake. It is the sound that is creating the pattern. When I've listened to the sound from the rings of Saturn, and I've listened to the sound coming from a newly formed crop circle, they are pitch perfect. They are a pitch perfect match, which led me to conclude that the rings of Saturn are being used like the strings of an instrument. They are sending signals which are creating the patterns on the landscape of Earth in the form of crop circles. So diatonic ratios then are C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Now messages can be and have been sent impregnated in between sound waves. So imagine my two fingers are sound waves. You can impregnate messages, sentences, and words inside, and those sound waves act as a conveyance. Now, when you look at the works of some of the famous composers of Earth, such as Mozart, Mozart would send encrypted messages to his family and friends by impregnating them in the sound waves of his symphonies. So here is another example of how it can be done. What I am suggesting is that there are sound waves being plucked from the rings of Saturn, and they have within them encrypted a message for humanity. So when a crop circle forms and it emits the diatonic ratios, it has a message for humanity. And as Leonardo da Vinci said, those who are able to read them will be able to read them and extract that message, which is exactly what I have done. So based on the notes of the diatonic ratio, I came to this understanding. So we have C, which is Gimel, D, Dalet, E, which is He, F, which is Vav, G, Zayin, A, Aleph, and B is Bet. So based on that, those notes and those words, this is what I came up with as a message. There's a lot more to it, but again, in brief, I'm just going to give you the surface meaning. So the messages that I've found in all crop circles are pretty much the same because the diatonic ratios are the same. And the message reads, he, which is him or her, can have reward, which is the purification of the soul, or punishment, which absurdly means ascension if he looks upwards to the sky. By hook, which is the transformation of the past to the future, or by crown, which is the coming of the Messiah, which is really the metamorphosis within yourself. And have greatness in the house. This is really talking about your own star family, your own nobility. So within the crop circles, there is a message that is telling us that we can return. We can return to our cosmic family. Now again, Leonardo says on the last line of his foreword in my book, we are watching, we are ready to embrace enlightened souls. It's amazing how all of these things connect to one another. Now, many years ago, I went to a newly formed crop circle. It was an organised trip. And a couple of days before I went, we had an email from the guide saying that the BBC had been in touch and they're filming a documentary about crop circles. And it involved the host, who was going to be British actor Danny Dyer. They asked if I would mind if the BBC kind of tagged along with what we were doing on that day to film their documentary. And the documentary was called I Believe. And of course, I had no objection to that. So on the day itself, we had the BBC camera crew, we had Danny Dyer. I was in the vehicle as they were filming the documentary. I was in the crop circles as they were filming the documentary. But it was a cold, kind of windy, drizzly rain kind of day where the rain was being carried in the wind. And it was fairly chilly. But as I walked into a newly formed crop circle, there was a beautiful lukewarmness. As I walked further into the center, I could feel a static energy, a static electricity that acted as kind of a warm force field. I could see that the hay, the crops, had been bent over, but not snapped, some kind of microwave energy. And it was a really enlightening day. So these crop circles not only contain a message, but they contain an energy, a noticeable energy change when you go inside them. It is atmospheric sound that is creating them. And as I've suggested already, it is the sound coming from the rings of Saturn, which are creating these crop circles. There are messages encrypted within the sound waves. And as Leonardo says, if you're able to read them, you'll be able to read them. He acknowledges that they are being sent by advanced beings. He acknowledges that those advanced beings are waiting for us to become enlightened, to return back to the cosmic union. These are messages from the stars. Now, talking about messages from the stars. As I was writing the movement book, Leonardo said, I need you to do a task. I need you to get a grid, and then I need you to get another grid, which you are to place over the first one, but you must do it at a diagonal angle. So the first grid was at normal, and the grid that overlaid it needed to be a diagonal grid. He says, put these over the images of the Nazca lines, and it will reveal to you many layers of understanding. And of course, I did that, and I've detailed that in the book. But in essence, it taught me the meaning of the Nazca lines of Peru, where you see many images of animals, of insects, of people, all over the landscape. And no one has really come up with the correct answer. So again, in brief, I'm going to do that now. And again, I would use the board. You can look at all of these images online, but I've just written them down for now because I can't particularly draw very well. So I'm just going to list many of the Nazca lines. So we have the likes of the spider, the famous spider. So what does the spider represent? Well, I found that it represents Orion, the constellation Orion, which is important throughout the whole of the ancient world, especially Egypt. Then we have the monkey, which is the head nebula of Orion. So again, we have two references to Orion. Then we have the famous hummingbird Nazca line, which I found relates to the nebula of Cepheus. We have the lizard that relates to the constellation Lacerta. There is the fish, Pisces Austrinus, which means the southern fish. You may now already begin to be realizing that they are all related to the stars and to constellations. Then we have the condor, which relates to the Condor galaxy. Then there is the heron, which relates to Grus constellation. Then we have the dog, which is the dog star, Sirius. Then we have the cat, which is Felis, which is situated between Hydra and Antlia. Then on the Nazca lines, we have a whale, which relates to the Cetus constellation. Then we have a man, which again relates to Orion. So there's now 3 references to Orion. There's also flowers and trees that are formed as Nazca lines, and this relates to Antares. And of course, you then have the famous landing strip that looks like a modern day runway, and that's of course exactly what it is. It is a landing, it is an airfield. Then we have a spiral. Now, any spiral relates to a point of origin, and you are either spiraling out or you are spiraling back to that point of origin. So in other words, everything begins at a point, expands, and then contracts back to that point. That is how creation itself works. So that is the spiral. So they are just a few of the images of Nazca, and all of them relate to a star map. Each image, each insect, each bird, each image of a man, etc., I have traced and correlated to a constellation in the sky. So the Nazca lines are a star map, but to where? They are all pointing in a particular direction. And I know that because I have followed the arrows of where they're pointing to. And that direction is our galactic center, which is Sagittarius A, by which there is also a gigantic black hole. Now, the center of the galaxy, Sagittarius A, is from where Earth is being showered by advanced star energies. So those are your Nazca lines. They are pointing in a direction where Earth is being showered by advanced enlightening energies. So here you hear it first. The Nazca lines are a star map. What is the significance of mountains? Well, the landing strip goes over and through mountain ridges, because in the mountains there are beings not of this world that are transmitting to the stars, and they are using the mountains as cover. So now you know the secrets of the Nazca lines of Peru. Now you know the secret messages within all crop circles. Now you know why UFOs are taking 90-degree turns, because they are transitioning from the 3rd to the 4th dimension. There are many people that have seen shadow people. Now, I've seen many of them myself. A couple of incidents is one morning at about 6:30 a.m. in the morning, I was awoken to a violent shaking of my bedroom door. As I got up to have a look, I opened the bedroom door and there was nothing there. But as I looked to my left, I saw a shadow person, a 3-dimensional shadow, walking through a bedroom wall in an adjacent room. Now, to me, in the 3rd dimension, this was an upstairs bedroom that had a 25-foot drop to the floor. But this shadow being just walked in a linear line. A second incident is when I was walking through dense forestry. And as I was walking in my direction, I saw a shadow person walking and passing me on my right-hand side, about 4 or 5 feet away from me, just walking through the trees in the opposite direction. And again, this was a 3-dimensional shadow person. So what are shadow people? When I go out on a bright, sunny day, I am a three-dimensional being, but my shadow is a two-dimensional flat. My shadow has lost one dimension in its projection. So when I see a three-dimensional shadow person, it is a fourth-dimensional being whose shadow is now three-dimensional. Its shadow has also lost one dimension in its projection. So a three-dimensional shadow person is a fourth-dimensional being that we can see in our dimension. If you don't believe that we can see other dimensions from ours, what you are looking at now is a two-dimensional flat. I'm looking at that two-dimensional flat, which only has length and width, but has no height. But I'm looking at that two-dimensional flat from a three-dimensional dimension. So we can also see fourth-dimensional beings that enter the third dimension and appear as three-dimensional beings. When we see UFOs in the sky, we are only seeing a part of them that is infringing into the third dimension. So when we see, for argument's sake, 5 lights in different parts of the sky, there is something beyond those lights that are not of the third dimension. But because they are entering the third dimension, we are seeing parts of them. It is like me putting my hand into some water. If I was living in that water, I would just see the tips of my fingers, but I would not see the top of my hand. And this is exactly how UFOs are appearing in the third dimension. So I hope that you've enjoyed today's podcast. I hope that it has learned you how dimensions work. And I look forward to next time when I'll reveal some more secrets to you. So I have been MichaelFeeley, and this has been The Secrets of Da Vinci. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak again very soon.